All right, you guys, today's lab is all about soil. We're going to be testing 2 different kinds of soil. And before you watch this lab and do this activity, you need to do our notes on what's in soil. If you haven't yet seen this diagram, you have not yet done those notes. Please do those notes first and then come to this lab. All right, when you're ready, this is activity 411, separating the pieces. We're going to read the purpose together and then go over the lab. Then I will put it together and do it for you, and you will be collecting the results and analyzing. The purpose of this: what is found in soil? Quite a bit can be found in soil, as you will learn during this lesson. However, to sort things out, you will need to use a structured approach to investigating soil components. It's already soil. If we want to know what's in it, we have to do a very structured lab to break it apart. All right, you should know from the notes, soil contains 4 components, 4 main components. They are minerals, air, water, and organic matter. Each component plays an essential role supporting living organisms. Reduced rock minerals, generally classified as gravel, sand, silt, or clay, provide a place for roots of plants to grow and microorganisms to live. Gravel particles are the largest and heaviest, while clay particles are the smallest. Silt particles are slightly larger and heavier than clay, while sand particles are larger than silt. The pore spaces, remember pores, in between the minerals hold water and air needed by plants. Decaying organisms, animal feces, and microorganisms make up organic matter in the soil. Organic matter increases the fertility of soil and provides nutrients for plant growth. Figure 1, which is this guy right here, shows an ideal mix of minerals, organic matter, air, and water for plant growth. So these percentages are what make up an ideal soil. That does not mean that's what's in every single soil, which is why we're going to do this lab. We're going to be taking a look at 2 different soil samples. We're going to break it apart through this lab to see really what percentages are these components, and then we would know if it is ideal or not. And then if it is not, how could we fix it is going to be something we'll take a look at. But if it is, what would it be ideal to grow? Just because it's an ideal soil does not mean we can grow every single crop, flower, tree, plant, etc. So we're going to take a look at the purposes of it. To set up our soil suspension, I'm going to fill a mason jar 1/4 or a quarter full of our soil sample. I'm going to dump the soil into the jar for measurement, and then you'll see me dump it out onto a paper plate and use a spoon to break up any of the dirt clods. We want this to be as fluffy and broken down and have the sample be all the same instead of having some be nice and some be cloddy. So we're trying to get it to be finely ground as much as possible. Once that's done, you'll see I have labeled our jar with the name of the soil sample so we don't confuse the two. I'm then going to pour water into the mason jar so that is now about a quarter of the way full with water. We're then going to gently pour our soil sample that we've broken up into the mason jar. On top of this, you're going to see that I'm adding a teaspoon of something called alum powder, which is a substance you can find in the spice aisle at the grocery store. This helps the soil dissolve more completely into our water so that it breaks apart a little bit easier and we can see those layers better. After that, I'm going to add more water into our mason jar so that in total, with everything in the jar, we're about 3/4 of the way full. We need a little bit of room for some movement as we shake it. I'm going to place the lid on the mason jar. I'm going to make sure I've sealed it tightly, and then I'm going to shake the jar vigorously. You're going to see a lot of shaking for at least 1 minute to really make sure we've suspended everything in the water. Once I've shaken our sample together for at least 1 minute, I'm going to place the jar upright and let it sit for 24 hours undisturbed. Next, I'm going to repeat all of these setup steps in a separate jar with another soil sample. This is a field sample from a potato field in Conway. Now that both soil samples are suspended and mixed, we're going to let them sit for 24 hours and move on to our wait time work. So during wait time, we're going to run some additional soil tests. Soil tests come in a kit like this. They are found at most hardware or gardening stores for pretty cheap. I think that whole kit was maybe like $8, and it has enough of the components to run 40 tests. So pretty inexpensive and long lasting, because you really only need to run a soil test before you plant each season, maybe one additional time, but really depends on what you're doing. So we're gonna run these other soil tests on both samples. So these tests include four different tests. We're gonna run a pH test, and then we're gonna test for 3 specific nutrients. These are all macronutrients. You guys should know that by reading the notes. So we're gonna be testing for the presence of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, N, P, and K if you're looking at the table of elements. Those are the 3 macronutrients for most plants. They're the most important nutrients for overall plant growth. So when you're looking at fertilizers, you're usually looking for different amounts of these things to correct an imbalance, because these 3 have the biggest impact, if you will. Soil pH is also pretty easy to modify. That's where lime comes in handy. And soil pH is a really good starting factor for what you can grow in your soil. So this is also important. These do not take very much time at all. They're gonna react with a little, we're gonna drop some powders into these, you'll see in a second. And these are pretty fast tests. That's why it's called rapid test. It's about a 10-minute test. So let's get started with soil pH. You're gonna watch me set up all 4 of these tests for both soil samples. And I'm using a pipette to pull soil from our jar mixtures that we just suspended in water. So I am pulling a little bit from each of those jars before they settle for the next 24 hours. When you look up close to these test kits, there's a fill line where you add your water and soil mixture, and then you're gonna witness me drop in a capsule that is color-coded to the test itself. So they're all powder reactants, and they will change color depending on the level of the nutrient or whatever it's testing. So they are all color-coded so you don't mix them up, but they're all powders inside those capsules. Once I add the capsule, I'll put the cap on, I'll shake it up really good, and then these all have to sit for 10 minutes to react, and we'll come back at the end to witness results. Okay, these have officially sat for the time requested for the powder to react and give us a correct reading. So now we're going to take a look at the results. So what I'm going to do is show you everything and determine an actual reading. So you will see some of the answers to the worksheet as we do this together, but you will be responsible to analyze what that rating means. So remember, in the post, I am attaching the guides for how to read all these levels and what the recommendations would be. So you're gonna have to complete that part of it. So we're gonna start with our soil pH, which is our green test. And I'm looking at the garden soil first. So we're looking for the color reaction as to what does this match on this test so that we can write down the actual result. So it's definitely in the green category. Sometimes it's also helpful to look at just the back. And I'm gonna say that that's actually probably closest to the top reading. That's a very dark green pigment. So that means garden pH is going to be 7.5, which is telling us it is alkaline. All right, we're gonna look at field next, our field pH. Our field pH is definitely in the red zone. Kind of reddish orange. It's almost got like a purpley tinge to it. I'm gonna put this in this like brownish purpley, this guy right here. So that's gonna be a pH of 6, even, which is acid. So far, this is what I have come up with. You will use the PDF included for you to do the analysis question. All right, so now we're gonna take a look at the nutrient test, starting with nitrogen, which is the purple, the N. We're gonna get a rating here. This is definitely dark purple. I think it's actually probably the highest one. So this is an N4, which says surplus. Our next is phosphorus, which is the blue test. This is phosphorus here. It's definitely blue, but it's pretty light. This is not clear though. So I would say it is probably here at P1. It's got a blue tint, it's not clear, but it's definitely not super blue. So we're gonna call this P1, which says it is deficient. And lastly, we have potassium, which is the orange test here, the K. This is a lot like that blue one. It's got a tinge of orange. It's not fully clear, but it definitely is not super orange. So I'm gonna also put that at the K1 level, deficient. All right, so you're gonna use the PDF to do the analysis. Let's look at nutrients for our field test. We're gonna start with nitrogen, which is our purple. To me, that doesn't even look purple at all. I'm trying to put it just on the white background. Maybe like a tiny bit, but not really, you guys. Tell me if you disagree. I'm gonna put this down here at NO. N0, which is depleted. I don't see really any color. Phosphorus is next, which is our blue. This definitely has blue coloring. I think it's even darker than our other one, especially down here. We definitely have some dark. I don't think it's all the way, but I'm gonna put it here at P3. Maybe P2. With all that down there, I'm gonna round it up to P3. So this is gonna be P3, sufficient. And then our last test, potassium, the orange. I think this is probably equal to the garden soil. It has a light tinge of orange coloring, but not a lot. So we're gonna put K1, which is deficient. All right, again, you're gonna answer these, and then you'll answer this. All right, we'll go back to the jars in 24 hours. Okay, our jars have officially sat for 24 hours. So we are going to come back to our main lab and do part 2, which is the observations of layers. You are gonna have a chart and analysis questions for both of the samples. First, we need to observe the layers that have formed and then describe them in the table. We're gonna try to identify the materials in each of the layers. And there is a key given to us with the letters O for organic matter, C for clay, ST for silt, SD for sand, and G for gravel. We are currently looking at the garden soil sample. So you're starting on page 3 with the student worksheet and the table labeled garden soil sample. I know that this lab would be a lot easier to do in person, and it's going to be hard to see the very small differences between these layers according to the chart. So I understand that. Please just do your best and try to take some good inferences and get as much detail as you possibly can. I am going to try to get up close, but I do understand with the lighting and the camera angles that you may not be able to answer the entirety of the chart. You should be able to get enough of an idea, though, to be able to answer the analysis questions. Here's a look at our second sample. This is the field soil sample. Try to do your best. Again, I understand it's extremely hard to see via the video, but you should be able to get enough observations to help you answer the analysis questions. To help you out a little bit more, I am attaching still photos up close of each of the soil samples on the Google Classroom assignment post, so you can take a look at those. This concludes our lab video. Don't forget to answer the conclusion questions and as much of the analysis as you possibly can. Thanks, guys. See you next time.